All right, synth fans, get ready, cause today we are going deep on a brand new synth, making some serious waves online, the Dreadbox Artemis. This polyphonic analog synth from the boutique Greek synth maker Dreadbox has been generating a ton of buzz, especially on Reddit. People are already comparing it to other synths in its class, debating the price, and of course trying to figure out if this is the polyphonic analog synth of their dreams.
It's interesting to see Dreadbox, known for their amazing analog monosynths, finally jump into the polyphonic world. And they're not holding back.
So let's break this down. First of all, it's a 6-voice polyphonic analog synth in a compact desktop format.
You're not sacrificing portability for those rich analog tones.
Exactly, and that 6-voice polyphony, that puts it head-to-head with some serious contenders like the Sequential Take 5 and the ASM Hydra synth.
It's a crowded field for sure. Dreadbox definitely needs to bring their A-game.
2 oscillators per voice. Tell me that's not a recipe for sonic bliss.
2 oscillators per voice. That means you can create incredibly rich and complex sounds right from the start. You can blend sawtooth waves for that classic analog thickness, mix in some square waves for bite, or even combine them with triangle waves for a smoother, mellower vibe.
My inner sound designer is already getting excited, but wait, there's more. Wave shaping, PWM, and FM on those oscillators. That's a lot of sonic firepower.
Dreadbox is not skimping on the sound design options here. Wave shaping lets you morph those basic waveforms into entirely new shapes, adding unique harmonics and timbral characteristics. Imagine taking a simple sawtooth wave and warping it into something totally alien and unique.
So you're basically sculpting the sound at a microscopic level. I love it.
Precisely. Then you have PWM, or pulse width modulation, which is like a rhythmic pulsation within the sound. It can create those classic buzzy, hollow tones that are perfect for basses and leads, giving them that extra edge and movement.
And FM, I know FM synthesis can get pretty wild. What kind of sonic territory are we talking about here?
With FM, or frequency modulation, you're using one oscillator to modulate the frequency of another. It can create incredibly complex and metallic sounds. Perfect for those bell-like timbres, clangorous textures, or even otherworldly soundscapes that seem to shift and evolve right before your ears.
It's like opening a portal to another sonic dimension.
And to top it all off, Dreadbox has thrown in a sub-oscillator and a noise generator.
The sub-oscillator.
Yeah.
That adds that low-end weight and foundation to your sounds, especially for bass lines. And the noise generator.
Well, that's your secret weapon for adding textures, from subtle air to gritty industrial soundscapes.
So it's like they've given you all the ingredients for a sonic feast. But even the best ingredients need the right tools to shape them into a masterpiece. So let's talk about filters and envelopes, the heart and soul of any analog synth. What's the Artemis packing in this department?
Dreadbox is known for their amazing filters, and Artemis doesn't disappoint. They're calling this low-pass filter super creamy, and based on their reputation, I'm inclined to believe them. Super creamy. Okay, now I need to hear this thing in action. But for those of us who aren't filter connoisseurs, break down what makes this filter special. Think of a filter as a gatekeeper for frequencies. The low-pass filter on the Artemis lets the lower frequencies pass through while attenuating or cutting off the higher frequencies. The cutoff knob controls where that dividing line is, letting you shape the brightness or darkness of the sound.
So turning the cutoff down makes the sound darker and moodier, while turning it up makes it brighter and more present.
You got it. Now, the resonance control is where things get interesting. Resonance boosts the frequencies around the cutoff point, adding emphasis and a ringing quality. Crank it up, and you can get this filter to self-oscillate, creating its own sine wave-like tone.
Ooh, I love that. Filters that can sing. But how do envelopes come into play? Those seem pretty important for shaping how the sound evolves over time.
Absolutely. Envelopes define how a parameter changes over time. The Artemis has dedicated ADSR envelopes for both the filter and the amplifier. That's attack, decay, sustain, and release. Each stage controls a different part of the sound's evolution.
So for the filter envelope, the attack controls how quickly the filter opens up. Decay determines how quickly it settles after the initial peak. Sustain is the level it holds at. And release is how long it takes to fade out after you release the key.
Exactly. And the same principles apply to the amplifier envelope, except it's controlling the volume of the sound instead of the filter cutoff.
This is where things start to get really expressive. You can create sounds that swell, fade, snap, or gently bloom. Having independent envelopes for both the filter and the amplifier is a powerful tool for shaping the dynamics and texture of your sound.
And that's just the beginning. We haven't even touched on the modulation capabilities and effects yet.
Okay, spill the beans. What kind of modulation madness can we unleash with the Artemis?
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Dreadbox Artemis, ready to explore some modulation magic and effects.
Absolutely. I'm itching to hear how we can really push these sounds into uncharted territory. What's the Artemis hiding up its sleeve?
We'll get this, the Artemis has two polyphonic LFOs.
Two.
That's right. Most synths in this class only have one, maybe two if you're lucky. But having two polyphonic LFOs, that opens up a whole world of rhythmic and textural possibilities.
Hold on, for our listeners who might not be as familiar with the intricacies of synthesis, what exactly is an LFO? And what makes them so special?
An LFO, or low-frequency oscillator, it's basically an oscillator that operates at a very slow rate, so slow that you don't hear it as a distinct pitch. Instead, it creates rhythmic pulses or cycles that can be used to modulate other parameters, adding movement and animation to your sound.
So instead of just having a static sound, the LFOs can make things wobble, pulse, or even breathe.
Exactly. And with two polyphonic LFOs, you can have independent rhythmic patterns running on each voice of the synth, creating these incredibly complex and evolving textures.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. But wait, there's more, isn't there? Something about cross-modulation. That sounds dangerous.
Cross-modulation is where things get really interesting. It allows you to use one part of the synth to modulate another part. For example, you could use an oscillator to modulate the filter cutoff, creating this dynamic wah-wah-like effect.
Ooh, so it's like creating this internal feedback loop within the synth itself, generating these unpredictable and evolving sounds.
Exactly. And Dreadbox has gone even further by including a mod matrix.
A mod matrix. Okay, we're getting seriously geeky here.
A mod matrix is a routing system that allows you to connect almost any modulation source to almost any destination. You can use the LFO's envelopes, velocity aftertouch, or even external MIDI controllers to control things like filter cutoff, oscillator pitch, wave shape effects, parameters, you name it.
It's like a giant patch bay inside the synth. I can already see myself getting lost for hours exploring all the crazy routings and discovering all the hidden sonic secrets.
And if that wasn't enough, the Artemis also boasts 4 stereo effects from Synthesizer: chorus, ensemble, distortion, and bit crushing.
Wait, hold up. Synthesizer. Those guys make some of the most creative and high-quality plugins out there. What are their effects doing in a hardware synth?
That was my reaction, too. It's a testament to Dreadbox's commitment to sound quality and innovation. They've clearly partnered with the best to ensure that these effects are top-notch and truly integrated into the synth's architecture.
So tell me more about these effects. What kind of sonic flavor do they bring to the table?
Well, the chorus and ensemble effects add depth, width, and movement to your sound, creating those lush, shimmering textures that are perfect for pad strings and atmospheric soundscapes.
Okay, I'm picturing these ethereal paths swirling through space like something out of a sci-fi film score. What about distortion and bit crushing? Those sound a bit more aggressive.
The distortion can range from subtle saturation to full-on grit and fuzz, adding warmth, bite, and harmonic richness to your sounds. It's great for beefing up bass lines, adding edge to leads, or even creating those gnarly industrial textures.
And bit crushing. That sounds like something straight out of a chiptune track.
Bit crushing is all about reducing the digital resolution of the sound, creating those crunchy lo-fi artifacts that are so popular in modern electronic music. It can add a retro digital flavor or create those glitchy, broken sound effects that are perfect for experimental music.
It sounds like Dreadbox has really gone all out to ensure that this synth can cover a wide range of sonic territory, from classic analog warmth to modern digital edge.
And remember, these effects are stereo and polyphonic, meaning they're applied independently to each voice of the synth. This level of detail is pretty rare in a hardware synth, and it allows for some truly stunning sonic landscapes.
Okay, so we've got these powerful oscillators and a preamp filter, tons of modulation options and high-quality effects. But how do you actually turn all of this sonic potential into music? That's where the sequencer and arpeggiator come in, right?
You got it. The Artemis has a built-in polyphonic sequencer that lets you record and play back entire chord progressions and melodies. It has up to 64 steps, and you can adjust the step length, swing, and playback direction to create all sorts of rhythmic variations.
And what about the arpeggiator? For someone who might not be familiar with that term, what exactly does it do?
An arpeggiator takes a chord that you play and automatically sequences it into a rhythmic pattern. So instead of just playing a chord all at once, you can have the arpeggiator cycle through the notes, creating these flowing melodic patterns.
So it's like having an instant groove machine.
Exactly. And the Artemis's arpeggiator has multiple patterns to choose from, including up, down, random, and more. You can adjust the tempo octave range and even apply swing to the arpeggio, giving you tons control over the rhythmic feel.
It sounds like this synth is a complete songwriting and performance powerhouse. You could create entire tracks with just the Artemis itself without even needing any external gear. But speaking of external gear, let's talk about connectivity for a moment. What options does the Artemis offer?
The Artemis has full-size MIDI in and out ports, so you can easily connect it to your computer, other synth drum machines, or even hardware sequencers. No more fiddling with those tiny mini jacks or adapters.
Thank goodness for that. Full-size MIDI ports are always a welcome sight. And what about power? Is it USB powered, or do you need a separate power supply?
The Artemis is conveniently USB powered, so you can plug it into your computer or a USB hub, and you're good to go.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Sound generation filters, envelopes, modulation effects, sequencing, and even connectivity. But there's one more thing I'm really curious about. MPE and Polyphonic aftertouch. These features seem to be all the rage in the synth world these days.
MPE, or MIDI polyphonic expression, and Polyphonic aftertouch. They're all about adding a whole new level of expressiveness and control to your playing. MPE allows you to control each note of a chord individually. Imagine playing a chord and being able to bend each note in different directions, adding vibrato to just one note or adjusting a filter cutoff of another.
It's like having 6 mini-synths all playing together.
Exactly. And Polyphonic aftertouch is like the icing on the cake. It allows you to use the pressure you apply to each key after it's been pressed down as a modulation source, so you can add subtle variations to each note you're holding down, creating a more nuanced and dynamic performance.
It sounds like playing a string instrument, where you can control the vibrato and tone of each note by varying the pressure on the strings.
That's a great analogy. MPE and Polyphonic aftertouch bring that same level of expression to the world of synthesizers. But to really take advantage of these features, you need an MPE-compatible controller.
Right. Not all keyboards support MPE or Polyphonic aftertouch. So if you're serious about exploring the expressive potential of the Artemis, you'll need to invest in a controller that can unlock all its capabilities.
And with that, I think we've covered pretty much every nook and cranny of the Dreadbox Artemis.
Wow, we've definitely gone deep on this one. From those dual oscillators to the Synthesizer, affects the modulation matrix, and even MPE and Polyphonic aftertouch. The Artemis is a seriously impressive piece of kit.
But the big question remains, is it worth the price tag?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We've explored all the features and specs. But what about the sound? How does it actually feel to play? And how does it compare to other synths in its class?
Well, stay tuned for part 3, where we'll dive into those crucial questions and share our final thoughts on this intriguing new synth.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We spent the last 2 parts really dissecting the Dreadbox Artemis, exploring its features, and honestly getting kind of lost in the world of analog synthesis.
We have, but at the end of the day, the ultimate test for any synth is how it sounds and how it inspires you to create music.
You're absolutely right. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about the Artemis's sonic character. From the demos I've heard, it seems like Dreadbox has stayed true to their roots, that warm, punchy analog vibe that they're known for.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've managed to achieve a pretty wide sonic palette with the Artemis. It's not just a one-trick pony. You can get lush pads, gritty basses, searing leads. It's all in there.
I've seen some people on Reddit mention that the demo video made it sound a bit bright, maybe even a little too clean for a Dreadbox synth. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's true that the demo focused on showcasing the synth's versatility. But, demos are just a glimpse into what an instrument can do. With 2 oscillators wave-shaping FM and that creamy filter, I'm confident you can dial in a wide range of tones, from smooth and mellow to raw and aggressive.
Plus, you always have the option of running it through external effects pedals if you want to add even more grit and character.
Exactly. And let's not forget those incredible Synthesizer effects. They add a whole other dimension to the sound design possibilities.
Those effects are a game changer. They bring a level of polish and depth that you don't often find in hardware synths these days.
Okay, so the sound is there, the features are impressive, but let's talk practicality for a second. How user-friendly is the Artemis? I know some people have expressed concerns about the small screen.
Yeah, that screen does look a bit tiny. I hope they've managed to create a workflow that's intuitive despite the limited display.
Dreadbox has a good track record with interface design. They tend to prioritize hands-on control with dedicated knobs for most parameters. So I'm hopeful that they've struck a good balance between functionality and compact size.
We'll have to wait for some more in-depth reviews to get a real feel for the user experience. But for now, let's circle back to the price. $1,399 USD. That's not exactly an impulse purchase.
It's definitely a premium price point, especially for a 6-voice analog poly synth. I think it's important to weigh that cost against your needs and priorities as a musician.
If you're looking for a versatile, expressive, high-quality analog polysynth, the Artemis is a strong contender. But it's not the only option out there.
Right. We talked about the sequential Take 5 and the TEO5, both excellent synths in their own right, and often a bit more affordable.
So how do you decide? What factors should someone consider when choosing between these synths?
It really comes down to your individual needs and preferences. What kind of sound are you looking for? How important are features like polyphonic aftertouch and MPE compatibility? And of course, what's your budget?
Right. It's like choosing the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb.
Exactly. Each synth has its strengths and weaknesses. It's about finding the instrument that best aligns with your musical vision and workflow.
Okay, so we've explored the Artemis' sound, its features, its pros and cons. What's the final verdict? Should someone hit that buy now button or hold off?
If the Artemis speaks to you, if you're drawn to that Dreadbox sound, I think it's worth exploring further. Check out demos, read reviews, and if possible, try one out in person.
Yeah, don't just buy into the hype. Do your research, trust your instincts, and choose the instrument that inspires you to create.
Here's a final thought for you. With the rise of artificial intelligence and all this music generation software out there, what do you think the future holds for analog instruments like the Artemis?
That's a great question. Will they become relics of the past? Or will they continue to be sought after for their unique sound and hands-on experience?
Only time will tell. But I have a feeling that the allure of analog synthesis, that's going to continue to captivate musicians for years to come. There's something special about the tactile experience, the unpredictable nature, and the raw sonic power of these instruments.
I agree. And the Dreadbox Artemis is a shining example of how analog synthesis continues to evolve and push boundaries. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of analog sound.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep diving deep